And welcome in GC Live Thursday episode of the show as we roll on towards South Carolina versus Florida this Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. As always, we are brought to you by our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. He is the branch manager of the Columbia Mortgage Network right over there across from Dreher High School. Give Clint a shout, 803-771-6933. If you want more information, go to clinthammond.com. As you see right there on the screen, MLS number is 71597. Email address chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. Again, 771-6933. You would think I would have that memorized by now, but I wanted to make sure I got it right. If you're in the market for a new home or you just want to maybe refinance, see what options you have out there to save you some money, Clint is your dude. So hit him up and let him work you through a process that he will make incredibly easy. Chris, what's up, man?
Man, another day, another busy day. Game time right up on us. We'll be here before we know it. So just continuing to dive into Florida. Looking forward to talking with our guests today. Looking forward to chatting with Gamecock fans. We got Peter Hongwell and Richard Hewitt in earlier than anticipated today, beating some of the regulars. How about that?
Yeah, Peter and Richard getting in with a quickness. Already in our chat room there. Y'all, I don't know where the rest of you are. I don't know what you're waiting on. Get on in. We will be joined shortly by Nick De La Torre from GatorsTerritory.com. Nick, nice enough to join us, and he'll be on momentarily. But I mean, dude, I feel like this game for a South Carolina Florida game, maybe doesn't quite have the juice some South Carolina Florida games have had in the past. That said, I feel like there's plenty to talk about with Nick today because it kind of, to me, goes a good bit beyond just this game because we talked about it yesterday. There's so much going on in Gator Nation right now that we may learn something today. We're going to learn today, even if it's not necessarily the most like sexy matchup this time between South Carolina and Florida. I'm curious to see. You know how it is, man. You when you're like local media dialed in, you hear a lot of stuff. So I'm curious to see among the things he can share what Nick's hearing there in Florida.
Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting stuff coming out. Man, we hit on some of it yesterday. I mean, just some of the stuff that's come out publicly with Dan Mullen, some of the takes that have been given on recruiting down there in Gainesville, just some of the stuff you observe on the field. We hit on some of that yesterday and, heck, talked about that about as much as some of the South Carolina stuff, of course, bringing it all back to that matchup. But it is interesting. I mean, you always want to pay attention to what's going on at other places. And although Florida is still favored in this game, although I think Florida should be favored in this game because they are playing better than South Carolina, all things considered. They, I think, have a talent advantage on South Carolina going into this matchup and all those things. It is kind of interesting down there in Gainesville. And so there's a little bit of drama, which always makes for some entertainment. So plenty of storylines like individually to dive in with both of these teams. You know, South Carolina, obviously it's year one of Shane Beamer. There's been tons of talk about the offense. Florida, you got Dan Mullen, even a perceived kind of hot seat type situation a little bit. Probably not, but a little bit. There's some disenchantment there. And so you're right. While the actual matchup itself doesn't have as much juice this year, there's still some very interesting individual storylines, you know, with these two teams.
Y'all hang tight with me here, trying to make sure we've got Nick's link sent out so that he can get on in here. He just messaged me. He's trying to hop on right now. There he is right there. Nick De La Torre from GatorsTerritory.com. Nick, we appreciate you making the time, man. We were just talking, and by the way, welcome in. This is your GC Live debut, I believe. So we appreciate it, man. How you doing today?
Doing well. I've gotten to talk to Chris in the past at Gator Country, where I used to be. He and Andrew introduced us, and He's helped us out a bunch. So I think first time I've seen Chris, but a familiar voice. It's all going well. I'm heading up tomorrow and not looking forward to the cold weather. I don't know if it's cold for you guys, but it's going to be cold for a South Florida boy like me, for sure.
Yeah, it's cold for us too, man, and we're not used to it yet. It's been very mild. Like it's felt great, I would say, here recently, and apparently it's about to hit. So to be ready. Luckily though, press box at South Carolina is enclosed, so you should be fine there.
There was one year, I think it was the Will Muschamp year, where maybe 2013, where they had all the injuries, and Florida, I think, threw the ball 4 times before South Carolina got a lead, and they had like the top windows like open, and it was freezing that night. And I'm looking it up, and I'm like, can we close these? Because I'm like, my fingers are frozen. I couldn't type anything. Not that anyone wanted to read, what was happening that night, at least from the Gator side. Yeah,
definitely, man. So I'm sure we've written a lot of stuff that Gamecock fans have not wanted to read this year as well. It's kind of interesting. Both teams come in, with 4 wins this year, but obviously Florida's still a big favorite. And Chris and I were talking, maybe not necessarily, this is a matchup. A lot of times Carolina fans kind of get juiced up for the opportunity to play Florida. And, I don't think it's really like a rivalry necessarily, but Carolina fans traditionally get fired up just for an opportunity to maybe knock off Florida. This year, I'm not sure if this matchup has quite as much juice on this end, but Chris and I were talking. There's plenty to talk about with what's going on in Florida right now, because it's been Florida's been in the news, so to speak. It's been it's probably a good week for us to talk to you, man. What has it been like there locally?
It's been hectic. My Twitter mentions have kind of been a war zone. I think Florida fans are just really disappointed. And I think coming into the year, on our podcast on Stadium and Gale, I was talking about, if everything went perfectly for Florida, I could see them going 10-2. And I'm talking about getting the ball bounces your way. Perfect season. I thought 10-2 was the best Florida could do. Realistically, probably 9-3, but Florida seems to always, or Dan Mullen's teams have seemed to lose a game that I don't think they should have. If you go back to 2018, his first year, they lose to Georgia and then compound that loss by losing to Missouri the next week. In 2019, they had a great year, 11-2. I don't think they had a loss like that. But then last year, 2020, you lose at LSU. You shouldn't have lost to that team. This year, you lose to Kentucky at Kentucky. That it's turned out they're looking better, but then they get a loss last week to Mississippi State, and then again you lose to LSU, who had already fired their coach. So I think sitting right now at 4-4, Florida should be probably a double-digit favorite in their next 4 games. You look, if you win the games that Vegas thinks you're going to win, you're 8-4. You win a bowl game, you're 9-4, and it's not as Chicken Little, the sky is falling as everything seems right now. So I think what's happened at Florida is you have an angry fan base and a coach who isn't typically good in press conferences, get asked about recruiting. And right now the perception is at Florida that you're not going to compete because you're not competing with Kirby Smart and with Nick Saban on the recruiting front. And you can be a top 10 class in the country and still be 4th or 5th in the SEC. So I think the perspective at Florida is you need to be challenging Nick Saban and challenging Kirby Smart for recruits, and Florida's not doing that this class. And it certainly hurts that, at least in our rankings on Rivals, Georgia's had the top class in the nation, I think, 4 of the last 5 years. So there's a perceived talent gap. And when Florida's not recruiting and going 4-4, I think you're going to see, what we're seeing right now, which is kind of the fan base boiling over a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point, too, about the recruiting rankings. It kind of made me remember South Carolina. I think their highest ranked class in the Rivals era was a 2007 class. And it was, I think it was number 6 nationally or 7, something like that. And that was like 4th in the SEC. That year, which was insane. And so you typically do see a lot of the blue bloods recruit up to the top. But Nick, I think one of the reasons maybe that has come up so much recruiting there, Florida lost 2 of its, I guess, better commitments with Julian Humphrey, Shamar James out of Alabama. And then, Dan Mullen gets asked about it. What has been kind of the issue in recruiting there? Is it overblown by the fan base about how recruiting is going, or is it just a little bit of the, measuring against Alabama and Georgia? Like, is it somewhere in the middle? Like, how is the recruiting operation going down there at Florida?
I mean, me being a baseball guy, I was always, taught, things are never as good as they seem. They're never as bad as they seem. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I think when Dan Mullen was hired, people looked and thought, oh, well, they didn't recruit really well at Mississippi State. And I even made the excuse for them. Well, it's hard to get kids to come to Starkville. You're not going to go down to Miami and get a kid from Opelika, or even a kid from St. Thomas Aquinas, where I went, to go to Starkville if they have other options. If they have a Georgia offer, an Ohio State offer, Clemson, Alabama, you're not going to get them at Starkville. So I think myself and the fan base kind of wrote off the recruiting issues that were evident at Mississippi State and in Starkville, and said, oh, well, when you put a different logo on the chest, now you're at the University of Florida. You have more resources. You have a more fertile recruiting ground in state. You're the only SEC team in the state, even though we talk about a big three with Florida State and Miami. You're the only team in the SEC in that state. You should be able to recruit. And I think the first couple of years, I thought the mindset was still the same, that the coaching staff, the majority of which were with Dan at Mississippi State, I thought they carried that mentality. And you saw a lot of kids. Dan's had a ton of success. Nobody really wanted Dak Prescott. Nobody really wanted Nick Fitzgerald. I mean, they've gotten their share of blue chips for sure when they were at Mississippi State, and they've gotten some, 5-star guys while at Florida. But I think the mentality of, we'll find guys who are 3 stars, guys that we think can be good, not necessarily that the recruiting rankings or that Rivals says are good, and we'll develop them. And I think that mentality, that mindset has really angered some people when, you're not competing, or you're not even finishing, with a hat on the table, so to say, for some of these guys. And to Dan's credit, the recruiting, the transfer portal has kind of changed recruiting, and Florida's done a great job. John Grenard, it was, I think, probably one of the first guys to really be in the portal and to make an impact. And he was a great player for 1 year at Florida. Van Jefferson, Trayvon Grimes. There's been a bunch of guys that Florida's gone out and get the portal, but I think fans view that as supplemental to recruiting. And until Florida, like I said before, until Florida is beating out Georgia's really the measuring stick for people here in Gainesville. So until you're beating Georgia out for those guys, I don't know that fans will be happy. And listen, they have 2 5-star running backs that they got in the portal, in Lorenzo Lingard and DeMarcus Bowman. Neither of them are really playing right now. No fault of their own. The guys ahead of them, especially Dameon Pierce, are having great seasons. So it remains to be seen what impact they'll have. But I don't know, other than just landing, more 4 stars and 5 stars. Right now, Georgia has more 4 and 5 stars committed to their class than Florida has total commitments. So I think that's, a huge point that you can look at when I get asked, why are fans not happy with Florida's recruiting?
And kind of keeping it right there with the fan base. I mean, how, like, you see stuff out there where, people want to say Dan Mullen may be on the hot seat. Obviously fans are unhappy right now. Is it really to that point? Like, Florida did play in the SEC championship last year. I mean, but I feel like in sports these days, fit is as important as ever. Like, are we really at the point where, because then you have, I guess it was Rick Neuheisel coming out saying, he believes Dan Mullen, if he could get an NFL opportunity, which, that's probably a big if anyway, that he'd be out of there, that he's tired of it. So is this one of those things? What is like circulating behind the scenes? Is it that both sides are kind of at odds with each other right now, or is it being a little bit overblown by just a portion of the fan base that's upset right now?
Yeah, well, I'll tackle the NFL part first. Last year, so you guys know as well as I do, you don't want, if you're an athletic director, you don't want your head coach to be had to have less than 4 years left on his contract. So when Dan first got to Florida, he had a 6-year deal. He was finishing his 3rd year, which means it's time to renegotiate, time for an extension, because we know that they want him to be have at least 4 years. So I think all it was is Jimmy Sexton being good at his job, shoots Adam Schefter a text before an NFL Sunday countdown. Hey, Dan's interested in the NFL. And that goes into contract negotiations. I would like to date Jennifer Aniston. I don't think she wants to date me. So a relationship needs both parties to want to make it work. I don't think there is a spot for Dan in the NFL. Would he want to, as a competitor, take a crack at it in the right scenario? Absolutely. I think I never thought Urban Meyer would be an NFL coach, but you give him a team that wants him, that has the number 1 pick, and there's a franchise quarterback available at number 1. Hey, this makes a lot of sense now. So do I think Dan Mullen's leaving for the NFL after this season? Absolutely not. I don't think he wants to. I think he's a competitor, and I think he can win at Florida. Right now, I think the fans are mad, and Dan's kind of, because he's not good in the media, it's easy to make him a punching bag. And I don't, not for 1 second on Monday when Dan said we'll talk about recruiting we're in season. We'll talk about recruiting during recruiting season. Not for 1 second did I think, oh, well, Dan Mullen doesn't recruit from August until, Thanksgiving weekend after they play Florida State. That's a no recruiting time. Of course they're recruiting. Every college coach in the country is. But when you have an angry fan base and his answer was so quick and dismissive of the reporter that asked it, you're going to get fans that say, well, you're ranked 35th, you're behind Purdue, you're behind Florida State. Of course you're not recruiting. So I think that's kind of what it is. It's frustration boiling over and Dan kind of just being an easy target right now. I don't think he's leaving for the NFL. I think you're going to have some big decisions to make. I don't think, Ty Grantham will get an extension. His contract expires this year. But even then, more importantly, who do you get to replace him at defensive coordinator, and what does that mean for your defensive staff? You don't want to hire a new defensive coordinator and say, well, we just hired a safeties coach, a cornerbacks coach, and we like our linebackers coach who was just given a new contract and an extension before this year. So you have to figure it out with them. I think if you get a new defensive coordinator, you have to let him pick the guys he wants to work with. On the offensive side of the ball, all the offensive coaches' contracts are coming up. Tim Brewster, who's historically a great recruiter, Greg Knox, who's been with Dan since he was at Mississippi State. John Hevesy and Dan have been on the same coaching staff since 2001 at Bowling Green, and Billy Gonzalez are all on expiring contracts. So there's going to be a lot of tough decisions for Dan to make, and I think that's kind of what Florida fans are looking for. If they don't like the way recruiting is going and they don't view some of these guys on staff as strong recruiters, the fans want Dan Mullen to find guys who can coach and guys who can recruit, because I think there's no doubt that Florida's coaches can develop, but fans want you to start developing 4 and 5 stars and not 3 stars.
So Nick, let's take it to the field now and talk a little bit about Florida on the field and what we've seen this year. 4-4. You kind of went through the losses earlier. A very close one against Alabama. Really, all the losses with the exception of the Georgia game, from a score line standpoint, have been close. 2 points, 7 points, 7 points to Kentucky, and then the Georgia game last week. So, what's been kind of the overview, the good and the bad of this year's Florida team? What we kind of have thought coming into this game, based on what we've seen, what we've heard, some defensive issues have cropped up. Look at how LSU, who couldn't run the ball at all, ran it all over Florida. Had some defensive issues. Offensively, just kind of a little bit of a weird kind of year. We're going through some of the rushing stats, for instance, yesterday. Kind of break down what you've seen from this team in a broad sense this season.
Yeah, so the first 2 weeks, obviously with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney, what left, and then when you look at the skill set of Emory Jones, I think all Florida fans knew, hey, this is going to be a different Florida offense. They're not going to throw the ball like they did. The coaching staff is going to have to come with a whole new plan, and credit them. They have, it's not, the old adage, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Florida came out and ran the ball. They were the nation's #1 rushing attack after 2 weeks. And I cautioned fans and I said, listen, it's FAU, it's USF, Alabama's coming. Let's see if Florida can actually run the ball, or if the running success they've had was a product of playing non-Power 5 teams. Florida was more physical on both lines of scrimmage than Alabama. And I don't know that that's a sentence that many people can say. Many beat writers can say about their team. Florida was more physical. They ran the ball all over Alabama, outrushed them. And after that game, even in a loss, I think I said, I feel better about Florida right now after losing to Alabama than I did after watching them play in the first 2 games. And I said, Florida should be able to run on anybody. Florida's losing games because they're turning the ball over. Their punter doesn't even have enough punts on the season to register for, the Ray Guy Award, or to even register in, the SEC punting, category. Florida hasn't even tried that many field goals. They're simply turning the ball over. They have more. They're tied for the most interceptions thrown all year of any team all year. So that's really the issue. And I'm writing about it today, is that if Florida doesn't turn the ball over, the Kentucky game, they had 15 penalties, 8 false starts, and it's a 7-point game. So if I'm Florida, I'm looking at that game and saying we beat ourselves. The LSU game, that was defense. You just couldn't stop a counter run. I think LSU ran 12 counters for I think probably 100-something yards, all in the second half. The problem with Florida, other than penalties and turnovers, is that it just seems to be something different every week. And I've asked Dan Mullen, would you rather just have one glaring issue that you can continue working at? Because it's almost like you're playing craps and you don't know what number of die, what number the die is going to be when you roll it. And that's going to be the issue this week. And that makes it harder for the coaching staff to kind of pinpoint and fix an issue when you're having 4 different issues pop up each week. So for Florida, the key is not turning the ball over, which they do every week. And obviously, looking at South Carolina, it's been a stingy secondary. I think it was an unceremonious departure for Torre and Gray, and he'll probably have some added gusto for this week to get his team ready to play his former employer, 2-time former employer.
Yeah, Torre and Gray's done, I would say, a fantastic job with this South Carolina secondary. And, I made the point in the Behind the Enemy Lines that I did for you guys, Nick, that this Carolina defense kind of is playing over its head a little bit based on what you would expect out of them just on paper. What are your keys to this game? Because my answer to that was basically that for Carolina to have any chance, Florida is going to have to continue that trend of putting the ball on the ground, of putting the ball in danger. And Carolina is going to have to continue the trend of their defenders taking advantage of it. Because if you just line them up and it's like an even, no turnovers game, and they play 10 times, like Florida is going to win this game most of the time. The only chance South Carolina is going to have is going to be that it's sort of one of those weird games where turnovers get skewed. Maybe, red zone gets skewed. One team's scoring touchdowns. One team's trying to kick field goals. Both teams have been pretty penalized, haven't really played a bunch of clean games on either side. But really, to me, it's Carolina would have to play a clean game and Florida would have to continue that trend. And even then, I think Carolina would probably need some type of defensive or special team score. Because, like I told you all, the offense just has not been efficient at all this year.
Yeah, I feel like Sandra Bullock in the blind side at some games. Florida's so good running the ball, and it almost seems like they're, when you have a running attack that can be as good as Florida and it's multifaceted, you have 3 very capable running backs that are in Naquan Wright, Malik Davis, and Damian Pierce that are doing it. You have 2 5-star transfers sitting behind them that can't even get onto the field because of that. And you have two different quarterbacks who lead the team in rushing. I put it on Twitter today. I don't know, has any SEC team ever had their two leading rushers be the starter and backup quarterback? Like, that's such a weird,
Yeah.
crazy stat.
We talked about that yesterday, by the way.
Okay.
That I've how not to cut you off, man, but how does that happen? Like, is it are they really just calling QB runs that often, or is it coming off of quarterback reads? Or
Well,
we've never seen that before.
Anthony had a 70-yard touchdown run against FAU, and then an 83-yard touchdown run. So that's a lot of yards just in two. Florida, there are some QB runs. They haven't done enough RPO, in my opinion. And then again, we're not privy to the actual calls, so it might look like an RPO and might not actually be one, when we're watching the game after. But also, Florida's quarterbacks are being instructed, like, hey, if they're so good, both of them, and they're different style runners. Emory's more elusive. Anthony's obviously at 6'4", 240. He can make people miss, but he has no problem lowering his shoulder and putting his helmet into somebody's chest. They've been instructed, hey, if the first read's not there, if the second read's not there, and you see a crease, just go. Just take it. So there's been a lot of runs that aren't designed quarterback runs where you'll see a quarterback leave the pocket pretty quickly because he sees a crease or sees a lane to run. But yeah, there's definitely designed runs each week in the game plan. And I think it would be a disservice to your offense if you tried to make those two guys pocket passers. But then there's times where it looks like Florida's throwing the ball just to throw it. And I think you run the ball so well, you just need to throw it well enough to keep defenses honest. And I think they do more than that in the passing game. So if we're talking about South Carolina, I would say lean on what you've done really well. And you've run the ball against everybody. I think they ran for more yards against Georgia than anyone since like the 2019 bowl game against Texas. Like, Florida can run the football. And if you're leading the nation in interceptions, stop doing that. Stop giving the quarterback who's turnover prone chances to turn the ball over. Run the football. You've been able to do it against Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky. Do it against South Carolina. Don't keep giving your quarterbacks chances to, give South Carolina a short field. I think, a writer that I used to work with, David Wunderlich, has Florida's given up almost as many points off of their opponent's defense scoring touchdowns or their offense scoring on a short field as they have giving up long touchdown drives. So it's really been, this whole season has been marred and shaped by Florida's turnovers, and they're not really fumbling the ball. So Sandra Bullock, blindside, run the dang ball.
Nick with the Sandra Bullock and Jennifer Aniston reference. So I look forward to see. Yeah, I look forward to seeing which other actresses you bring up on our next. Maybe here's another opportunity. Next question for you to work someone in. You mentioned Anthony Richardson, Emory Jones. Give us an update on Anthony Richardson from a health standpoint. Do you expect him to play? Do you expect him to be limited? And if so, how could that affect, what Florida does offensively, whether it's him or Emory Jones or even both in the game on Saturday?
Yeah, he wasn't able to go on Monday or Tuesday, dealing with the concussion protocol, that he suffered concussion in the early third quarter against Georgia. Never even came back out in the field. He has been at practice, but hasn't participated this week. So it'll be interesting. I don't expect that he'll be able to play at least in a full capacity, even if he is able to go. I think it'll be Emory Jones, and then after him, Jalen Kitna from people I've talked to that have been in practice. Jalen Kitna is a freshman, son of John Kitna, former NFL quarterback with the Bengals, and I think it was the Cowboys as well. He's the backup. So if Anthony Richardson can't go, then the two quarterback system's out the window. It'll be just Emory Jones. If Anthony can play, I still think it'll be more Emory Jones as Anthony kind of is coming back. Now, it's interesting because I wrote it, and fans have been calling it for much longer than I wrote it. But at 4-4, all the goals you've had for the year are done. So it's time to start playing for next year. And I wrote and said, Anthony Richardson needs to be your starting quarterback from here on out, because you want him to go through that learning curve and get those growing pains out now. You don't want those growing pains to happen, when he's making his first start next year against Georgia or out on the road at Texas A&M. Let him have that now. It's unfortunate that Dan made the decision against Georgia and he gets hurt. Not unfortunate. Listen, Georgia, that's going to be a tough defense to play against if you're starting your 40th game. It was his first start. I still think it's the right call. You'd rather him take those lumps this year than next year. Just unfortunate that after almost as soon as you make the decision to go to him to start the rest of the way, that he has an injury that's going to potentially keep him out this week.
Final thing I have for you, Nick. I was curious. I know that I guess they canceled the media availabilities this week as far as players go. Something our fans have been asking. It's kind of been a discussion on the message board. Are you getting, and you just mentioned obviously some of the major goals for this season kind of out the window. Is there a sense at all whether or not the current players are still dialed in as far as the rest of the season mattering? It has some of the negativity from the fan base entered the football facility, or is it kind of still just, business as usual, and the guys are excited to finish out the year on a positive note with, as you mentioned earlier, several winnable games to finish out the year?
The one I was going to be looking at would be Kaiir Elam, because he has a real chance to be the first cornerback taken in the draft. I think it'll be probably between him and Stingley, and we'll go through the underwear Olympics and pro day and the combine and all that. But he has a real chance to be a top 15 pick in the upcoming draft. And I thought, hey, if Florida goes out and plays Georgia and loses, he's a guy that, could you blame him if he said, hey, I'm shutting it down? He's dealing with a knee injury. He's had a lingering knee injury that he sustained against Alabama that caused him to miss several weeks. A guy that if he had decided to shut it down and get ready for the draft, I don't think fans would have blamed him in a season like this. He's not doing that. So if Kaiir Elam is sticking around, I think that kind of shows the mood in the locker room. And I don't think Florida's given up. They've definitely heard the fans. Penn State grad transfer Antonio Valentino said, was not going to battle with fans, but just telling fans to hey, we see you calling for Todd Grantham's job and tagging us in it. And what do you want us to do? We love our coach. We think he's great. Stop this. This negativity is not helping us at all. So I think the fans have seen the negativity, or the players have seen the negativity around the program, but I think they're kind of rallying each other. I think what Dan's goal was, I don't think it was a slapping the hand of the media because he didn't like the questions we were asking. I think his goal was listen, let's just not have to have the players focus on anything else. I think the mindset of Dan and the guys in the building are, winning won't fix everything, because obviously that recruiting part that we've talked about, winning won't fix everything, but it will calm people down. Let's focus everything inside this building on just one common goal of going up to Columbia, winning a game. Florida's lost 3 out of 4. They need a win to calm fans down. Like I said, I don't know that the 4 games left on the schedule, other than a rivalry game with Florida State on Thanksgiving weekend, will really do anything to make the fans super happy. But obviously a win is better than a loss. And I don't know if I want to be on the message board or Twitter if South Carolina comes away with an upset this week. But yeah, I think that's kind of what has happened with the media this week, is that Dan is just trying to just really focus in. Now, if he cancels it next week, I might have to sign some NIL deals to get some interviews, but I think it was just a 1-week thing for us.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I was actually looking around y'all's message boards earlier this week, and I know how it is on our message boards too when things are pretty bad. So what would be an interesting time, I'm sure, on the Gator Twitter and on y'all's message board if South Carolina pulls this game out. I think that's a really tall task, man. I think it probably goes the Gators' way, but we shall see. Nick, appreciate the time, man. Be safe, safe travels. let us know if you need any food recs. We'll let you know where to go, man. And enjoy the game on Saturday. Try to stay warm, okay?
I'll do my best, and I'll take any food recommendations you guys have. You just shoot them my way.
Okay, awesome, man. Appreciate you, Nick.
Have a good one.
Go check out Nick's work. That is GatorsTerritory.com. Chris, we had an excellent recommendation from several folks in the chat who said if Nick's feeling a little bit just too chilly in the press box on Saturday, that he probably needs some of these Dead Soxy socks.
Yes. Does the gentleman know about Dead Soxy? And he also mentioned the underwear Olympics as, talking about the NFL Combine. Nick, quite the jokester. Dead Soxy does not, Wes, have underwear. Well, they do have a socks. You can check them out at deadsoxy.com, DEADSOXY.com. Wes, for Saturday, you probably don't want to be rocking the no-shows. You need something up your leg, right, under your pants. So probably more along the lines of the boardroom dress socks. But check out their entire catalog at deadsoxy.com. That's DEADSOXY.com. And the good news is, for listeners and watchers of GC Live, use this promo code COCKY, COCKY. You can get 25% off your entire order at deadsoxy.com.
We always appreciate Dead Soxy and all of our sponsors, Clint Hammond, Dead Soxy, and our friends at Primal Gourmet, who is the primary sponsor anytime that your chat pops up or that we have somebody on our guest line. So that's our three primary GC Live sponsors. We appreciate all of them. Interesting stuff. I can't shake this idea or this thought, Chris, that basically can South Carolina force whoever the quarterback is? It seems like it's going to be Emory Jones. But both sides, both schools right now, both coaching staffs are dealing with actually a similar situation as far as having a couple of quarterbacks, but one of them is injured. I've continued to check this week on the South Carolina end. I would be more surprised than I was even earlier in the week if it's not Jason Brown at quarterback for South Carolina. That's what everything is pointing to right now. Mm-hmm. You never say anything's 100%, but it's got the way I'm sort of reading the tea leaves on who has been taking first team reps and the way things have played out based on the same information basically every week as far as how they've done things in practice. It's probably going to be Jason Brown. If you look at the Florida side, obviously we're not dialed into their reps, but I can't imagine a situation where you have a guy who has been a starter and has gone and played and has played a lot of ball for you and is healthy and has taken first team reps this week when you're publicly telling everybody Anthony Richardson was not taking reps to start the week. To me, this is going to be Jason Brown versus Emory Jones as far as the two teams go. But to me, it really, you can make it as complicated as you want, but this game boils down to, can South Carolina's defense make Emory Jones have to throw the football? Because Florida will turn the football over if you force them to have to throw the football. They've proved that. South Carolina has proved they will take advantage of opportunities to pick off quarterbacks. The problem is there's a difference between a quarterback having to throw into windows in 3rd and 8, throw into windows into second and 10, 2nd and 12 versus throwing on first down when you're comfortable off play action, throwing on 3rd and 3 when the defense is stacking the box, throwing off a play action where you're rolling your quarterback out and he has maybe one or two basically sight options as opposed to reading a defense and having to put the ball in a tight window. So to me, when I look at what Florida's done, I look at what South Carolina's done defensively. Not even getting into the South Carolina offense against the Florida defense. If Florida runs the football the way they've proved that they can so far this year against this Carolina defense, it's really going to be hard for anything else on the Carolina perspective to even matter, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, look, that's a concern because South Carolina's had some issues stopping the run. I think we think about, you think back to the Tennessee game and you think about some of the explosive passing plays. Well, there were some explosive runs in that game. There were some explosive runs, against multiple other teams. I have been thinking all week, Wes, about something that Sherrod Golightly, former Gamecock Spur, told me after the Troy game. You remember going into that game, Wes, Troy had not been running the ball at all throughout the season. They had really, really struggled. They came into that game. Troy had some effective runs against South Carolina. And I think we all exited that game going, ooh, that was, South Carolina won, but that was a little concerning. Sherrod Golightly pointed out a particular type of run that Troy ran in that game with some success. And his quote to me was, they're going to see that again when Florida comes to town. It was a run that Florida likes to run. Well, now fast forward, we've seen that Florida, despite not running it in terms of volume a lot, they have some backs like Damian Pierce, who we talked about yesterday, who Nick mentioned today. Very efficient. They've got a running quarterback. I mean, this is a team that's very capable of running the football. And so I think when you look at the fact that this Gamecock defense has had some struggles lately, they've struggled fitting the run, I think on the second level at times, that is a concerning thing for them. But you're right, that's going to be a key to the game. They are going to have to try to make Florida one-dimensional, get them in third and long. You've got to watch out for Emory Jones being able to run the football. You want to try to make him a thrower. Now, easier said than done. But if they can't do that, if Florida's lining up and running it, it's going to be, another long day defensively, and it's going to make it very tough on the Gamecocks offense, which is going to have to score some points on their own, to win this game.
Yeah. Do you remember what the run was?
Going to have to go back and look at it. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick in my talk with Sherrod.
I know it was interesting. Florida got gutted by LSU off that counter play. We've seen Carolina run a little bit of counter this year. A little bit surprising how little of the counter play we've seen, just simply because Oklahoma, with Lincoln Riley, the counter, I believe, is a huge staple of what they do offensively from a scheme standpoint. So, I'm a little bit shocked we haven't seen a little bit more of it. I'd imagine that's something we'll see some of for South Carolina on their side of the ball as well. But Florida basically got gutted by the counter against LSU. Georgia ran it some. Georgia did a little bit of everything in the running game against them, but that's something we'll definitely see on Saturday. Have you been able to pull it up yet, Chris?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different runs that we talked about in the Troy game. Let's see, or two. Yeah, there's two different runs, and they're both in GIF format here. One of them is just a little inside zone that bounced outside. I think this particular play that Sherrod was talking about it was a little like an outside zone play. And so basically what happened is, Troy had been running inside zone for most of the game. And I think it eventually frustrated South Carolina to where the Mike linebacker shot the gap. And then they just ran a little outside zone play off of it. And I'm pretty sure that's the one that Sherrod was talking about. And this one was in the third quarter, and a first down run, just pretty easy money, lost contain on the edge. And I think that was the one that Sherrod pointed out Florida liked to run.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I remember watching that game just thinking this is far too easy for Troy right now to be able to run the football against South Carolina. We'll be curious to see, dude, the backup linebackers start to get more time. Clayton White was asked specifically twice about that this Saturday. He said, or about this coming Saturday, but he was asked on Wednesday, did those guys show enough, basically? Because we talked about it. We saw a good bit more of Mo Kaba. He entered the game in the second quarter. And I think just based on the way they used him, they're a little bit more comfortable with Mo Kaba right now as far as being a backup. We've seen him play a pretty good bit. Then you actually saw Darrell Ware come into the game prior to that, or after that, I should say, prior to Debo Williams. And then Debo Williams came in a little bit late. But Clayton White did say those guys, showed some things, showed enough to maybe get more playing time. Now, does that mean, in a game, let's say the game is tight, it's not a blowout. Does that mean they're getting 20% of the snaps, or you know what I mean? Or is that sort of just what a coach is going to say type thing? I don't know. We'll find out. I think that'd be something the last 4 games. You want to see, if you're a Carolina fan, you want to see those guys get some PT. You want to see them get experience. You want to see them making progress. There's a lot you're going to need from those guys next season. And not that you're playing for next season, but if you're going to build some depth there, you got to get those guys on the field at some point, Chris. And I'm not saying they're ready. I'm not this guy who's like beating the drum saying, why aren't they playing? Because clearly there's a lot more to linebacker than just looking the part physically. Like those guys look the part physically, I think. But there's a ton more to it. That said, I like the way Debo Williams just seems to disrupt things. Like he may not necessarily be shooting the right gap at all times, but he's going to go blow somebody up, it seems like.
Yeah, Mo Kaba, a kid that, has tremendous physical ability. You look at his high school film, and I think his biggest thing was one of his biggest things, and he's missed a lot of time. He tore his ACL in high school, and so it has taken him a while to get back to that, to where basically, you miss a year in terms of your recovery time. And time away from football and time getting acclimated to college. And so he's still a young player. So is Debo Williams. That to me was another interesting thing. Exactly what you said out of Clayton White's press conference. I had the same takeaway, the same question as, okay, do those extra snaps, will they come? A, and B, when do they come? We saw several games in a row where Damani Staley he did play every snap, and Brad Johnson wasn't far behind. Those guys, even in games that were out of hand, Wes, still that was the case. We saw a much earlier insertion point for some of those guys like Mo Kaba, Debo Williams, Darrell Ware in the A&M game. We know that this staff doesn't want to just play 2 guys at linebacker. That's not an ideal situation for anybody. So have they made enough progress to where they're going to get some playing time in, a more tight game situation? I think it's very interesting, very interesting question. And I think those guys could certainly help this team if they continue coming along.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll find out on Saturday. We've got one more day before we'll get there as well. We'll talk tomorrow with our final preview of South Carolina versus Florida. That's all I got for today, Chris. You got anything additional? You good?
Nah, man. I'm good for today. Appreciate everybody joining in today. Appreciate Nick De La Torre. And looking forward to tomorrow, final preview day before Florida comes to town.
Yeah, appreciate all of you joining, supporting, all that stuff. Appreciate Clint Hammond. Appreciate Dead Soxy. Appreciate Primal Gourmet. Be sure to like, review, subscribe, click all the buttons, whatever platform you're looking on. Subscribe to our YouTube. Hit the little bell button so that you get a notification whenever we go live. We're going to continue to expand our video operation on GamecockCentral.com. And appreciate all of you. Joey, appreciate the kind words, man. Best Gamecock stream. We only had to pay him $50 to say that. So appreciate you, Joey. For Chris, I'm Wes. See you all on Friday.